morning and welcome to Together We Can. This morning, our session is supporting lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and questioning youth in out-of-home care. I'd like to welcome our guest speaker this morning, Lorraine Overlow. Overlow. I said it right, initially this morning. Lorraine has been with the Sioux Falls Area Court-appointed Special Advocate Program, or CASA as we all know it, since July of 2001. She was a case manager for 6 months, then promoted to program manager. Lorraine was a member, co-chair of the National CASA Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Transgender, and Questioning Work Group Advisory Committee since its inception in 2003, and is presently a member of the National CASA Inclusiveness and Outreach Committee. She's been a facilitator at the National CASA Conference on the topic that we're going to listen to today for out-of-home care for our youth, and has presented in similar information to child protection social workers, street outreach, and residential treatment staff and therapists, physicians, nurses, and many others. Prior to working for CASA, she was a child protection social worker in Minnesota and South Dakota collectively for 10 years, and a juvenile correction agent in the state of South Dakota for 3.5 years. Lorraine has a part-time position as the director in the local LGBTQ agency, the Center for Equality, and she's a master trainer regarding youth and out-of-home care, LGBTQ. It's hard to say all those initials. For the National Association of Social Workers. Welcome her this morning. I want to remind everyone, again, turn off your cell phones or put them on silent.
Thank you. That's a lot. It really is, and it just means that a long time ago there was a lady who worked for National CASA, and she ended up finding her way to South Dakota, and we had some conversations about things that were happening in Texas with the law there, and from that we just put together a small group of people. I think we started with 8 people around the country and tried to figure out how can National CASA help local programs work with our youth, particularly LGBTQ youth. Okay? And by the end of this, hopefully you'll all be able to rattle that off as you say it enough times, right? Because it just comes with practice, but that's what will really help you get rolling and build your credibility with the youth that you're going to work with. Can I just start out by finding out how many are CASA volunteers? Fantastic. Thank you so much for what you do. How about CASA staff or board members? All right. And what else do we have in the room? Attorneys? Child protection? Is that child protection? DCFS, Department of Children and Family Services? Okay.
I'm an intern at CASA.
An intern. See, we're starting young. That's great.
I'm an intern plus I'm a volunteer.
Wonderful. Thank you. Anyone else that we haven't missed? All right. Thank you all for being here, because it's really starting with you. You know, I can stand up here and do my little song and dance. It's what you do with the information you get when you leave here today. Where are you going to go with it? Who are you going to talk to? And that's where the impact really comes about, because if nobody has those courageous conversations, then the kids that we're working towards reaching and making sure they have a safe place and a permanent place are going to be left behind. They're going to be the ones that continue to live in silence for many reasons. Excuse me. Sorry, John. What I want to do is we're going to just start with an activity, because it's really early, and I promise you it's painless, but I was noticing all of you walking in, and you all, if you didn't come in alone or you know other people in the room, can I just have you each pair up really quick with somebody that you've never met before or that you know nothing about? Sorry, I got to split you two up. You're trouble already. All right? Seriously. And then I need you to find a sheet of paper. Okay? And if you need paper, I brought some along for you. Anybody need paper? You got it? Okay. Now I promise you, you're not going to have to hand in your papers. I'm not going to collect them. I'm not going to have them published. No. Although I'd like to. It's kind of fun sometimes. But what we're going to do is I want you to write down your answers. Even though it seems obvious to you, please write them down, because as we move forward, you'll understand why. So, question number 1. I want you to please write down the 3 most important people or relationships in your life. At least 3. If you want to write down 5 or 10, that's fine. But the 3 most...
Just together? The person
just yourself. Write down your answers individually first.
Are there people like we know?
Yep.
You want their names, or just like friend, mother, sister, brother? How do you
I want you to list that particular person.
name?
Yep. So those particular individuals. Maybe it's your significant other, maybe it's your mother, maybe it's your whomever it may be. Might be your next door neighbor, I don't know. Okay? Everybody got 3 down at least? Okay? Now, write down at least 3 places that have special meaning to you.
Cities, locations, doesn't matter.
Yep. Yep. 3 places of special meaning. Okay. Everybody got 3? Okay, now, at least 3 topics of conversation that you discuss with your friends or family. You usually get together. I don't know if you're like me. We usually hash through the same things. The 3 topics of conversation that you and your family or friends usually discuss. Okay. Then finally, you got to think about it now. When you're not sleeping or working, I want you to list at least 3 leisure time activities that you enjoy doing with friends and family. What are the 3 things that you enjoy doing, or by yourself? What are the 3 things you do to fill your time? When you're not eating crawfish and gators and frog legs.
That's really all we do.
That's all I've done so far. Okay, may I borrow your watch now, please? Thank you so much.
It's got a little tricky thing on there. There we go.
Well, thank you.
Good thing you have your glasses, because I wouldn't be able to see a second.
I may not either. Never know. It does kind of blend in, doesn't it? Okay, so what we're going to do now with your partner, I want you to decide who's going to go first. I want you to raise your hand in your pairs if you're going to go first. Okay? Ladies, who's going first? And I'll give you the rest of the instructions. Back there, who's going first? You will? Okay. Are we all set to move forward? Because here's what we're going to do. You brave souls got it easy. What I would like you to do, those of you that raised your hand, is share with your partner. I want you to introduce yourself, but all of those things that you just wrote down are taboo. You can't mention any of them when you're introducing yourself. Okay? Here's the deal. Don't start yet, because you're going to talk for 90 seconds. Okay? You ready? For 90 seconds, introduce yourself to your partner. Ready? Go.
Just the first section.
All of those things on your list you cannot discuss. All 12 things you cannot discuss. Introduce yourself. Remember, it's taboo. Don't mention those things. If you mess up, that person's not going to respect you anymore. They might even despise you. At the very least, they may no longer respect you. Don't talk about anything but those items on your list. They're taboo, they're off limits, don't talk about them. Okay, 5 seconds. All right, time. Oh, you guys listen so well. That's awesome. All right, now guess what? You're worried already. We're going to switch. And this time, the person who wasn't just doing the talking needs to talk for 2.5 minutes, and everything on that list is taboo. Okay? So the second person, you should just be listening. Okay? I mean, you can ask and interject a small question, but we'd rather just see what you come up with for 2.5 minutes. All right? Are you ready? 2.5 minutes. Remember, everything on that list is taboo. Go. Introduce yourselves, please. Okay. I wondered. That's okay. Do over. Remember, if you use anything on your list, people are going to reject you. That person might despise you. They're no longer going to respect you. Don't slip up. You're not done yet. Remember, it's taboo. Okay, time.
The only thing I didn't put on here was words.
Time.
So it's the only thing I could talk about.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
What time are we done? Do you know what time we're supposed to be done?
You're already
Oh, okay. No, I was... Okay. 10? Thank you. I didn't even know. So would you give me like a 15-minute warning if you think of it? Thank you. Okay, so... How many of you are glad you went first? How many of you wish you'd have gone first? Yeah? Okay. Now that can be kind of fun just because of the time crunch, right? How long did 2.5 minutes feel? Forever. Right? So everything on your list are pretty typical things, right, that we talk about in daily life, right? What would it be like if you had to do that for 2 hours, or 2 days, or 2 years, or a lifetime? How would that feel? Right? Did you feel like you were missing part of yourself when you were not able to talk about it? People that are important, places that are important? What made it hard? It wasn't hard? We'll come back to that one. Did anybody find it hard? Okay. What about it made it hard?
Because you had to be kind of creative and walk around and kind of share some of your intimate self, but not the real intimate part of you, like those main relationships.
So you had to share.
Because I identify with those main relationships as part of my identity.
Okay. So it's part of your identity. Those things that are important, those places, people, are relationships, right? What made it easy?
Because I have so many other interests that I was only able to write down, but the other interests I was able to talk about that I didn't write down because I have so many of them.
Okay, so you have a diverse portfolio of things that you can talk about depending on whom you're with? Okay. Would that be true if you were a 14-year-old?
Probably not.
Probably not. Right? So, and maybe, in the news, sadly, we've lost another one of our youth to suicide, right? Do you think he felt like he had a diverse portfolio of things to talk about? No. Do you think he felt isolated? Yeah, I think so. How many of you forgot and started talking about things on your list? A few? Yeah? It's like, oh, right? Okay, imagine that experience. Let's translate that into all of a sudden you start talking about, you identify as a young gay male and you're at school and you start talking about what you did over the weekend and out slips your partner's name. Everybody's like, right? That's why I was trying to talk over you saying you might be rejected. You might experience that bias from other people. They might be like, ooh, it's kind of, might be catchy. I don't know, right? We don't know what the experience is going to be. But it's really taboo to talk about those things because people will put it together, okay? Did y'all, those of you that found it difficult, did you feel like you had to invest a lot of energy in not talking about those things? It's like, oh, what else can I talk about? 2.5 minutes feels like forever, right? What else is there? So imagine as a CASA volunteer, or when you're training your volunteers, what do we do when we first talk to kids as volunteers? We want to learn about them, right? And if we're not open to what that youth is saying, and we're not perceived by that youth to be someone that's safe to share that information with, what do you suppose they're going to be doing? They're going to be acting like they're the person talking for 2.5 minutes that feels like 6 years. It's like, oh, Lord, now what does she want to hear? Now what do I tell them that I haven't already told? But I have to keep that safe. So am I really going to be engaged in our conversation? I'm going to be too worried about slipping up. And then all of a sudden it's in my record forever. And that's going to land me in places that might not be safe, that might not be healthy for me, that may continue the abuse cycle that I experienced at home that landed me in out-of-home care. What are some of the things that a youth might experience if they had to keep all those important things quiet? I mentioned the social isolation. You're not going to have anybody that you can really talk to. What else? What are you going to see in the youth that you're working with that maybe don't feel like they're at a point yet or in a safe enough place to come out to you, or to anyone for that matter?
I think you might see aggression.
Aggression?
Kind of mask what they're trying to hide from you. They just become, angry, outspoken.
No, we're not going to write them down. Angry and outspoken because...
Figure out what's going on. Like in my personal experience with my daughter, she was probably 14, 15, and she really just started acting out and skipping school and just like she lost control of everything. But she knew that she had this underneath. So in order to mask that and to kind of help her, I guess, push through or have something to do, I'm not sure where it came from, but she was, she would be angry all the time.
So the anger might be a safety mechanism?
Yeah. Or
it could be acting out, because I don't know what these emotions are that I'm supposed to be dealing with, and I know internally that I already feel different than my peers, right? My best friends all had boyfriends, and I was thinking, I just didn't feel, that wasn't going to ever be me. I just didn't really know why or have the words or have that connection. Of course, that was, back in the age when, time was probably dirt when I was growing up, but who knows, But it's about what people experience. If I don't have a safe place to be, or if I'm not sure I can talk to my mom about, I think I might be different than my friends, and I don't think that's going to be safe, or I don't think I can talk to my CASA, I'm not going to know how to react to situations. So I might act out. I might internally or internalize things, right? So I might be depressed, okay, or anxious, right? If you see a youth in school and they just can't concentrate, teachers are already thinking, oh boy, here we go again. We have a problem with this student. Well, it could be because they're distracted. It may be situations at home, but it might be situations within, right? If I'm trying to process and learn who I am and figure out where can I be safe and who the heck do I talk to, I'm probably not going to be able to concentrate on learning geometry or geography or what? 8th grade math, whatever they're teaching now in 8th grade, or 5th grade. Because kids are coming out much earlier than they ever used to, which means they're questioning their identity and trying to determine, is it a gender identity issue or is it a sexual orientation? I don't have those terms. I just know that I feel different than my friends. Okay? So what am I going to do? I'm going to be frustrated. What else might you see from the kids? Good morning.
They might be experiencing anxiety.
Anxiety? Yeah. Anxiety. I don't know who to talk to. I'm going to be maybe bouncing off the walls. So that leads me to a question then. How about all of the kids that we know are diagnosed with ADHD? How many of those, is that probably a secondary reaction to internalized fears, frustrations, right? Lack of information? As you get to know that youth, you may find they'll settle in. Right? What else? Substance abuse, maybe? Right? That's huge within the gay population. And if I use gay, I'm going to talk with it as an umbrella term, and we'll get to terminology in a little bit. But especially with young gay men, extremely high rates of substance abuse. What else?
Overcompensation. I know somebody that was talented, but he just went overboard with it, because this was what he was good at, so he just really got into it.
Okay. So the overcompensation with the one thing that I'm good at and everything else will go down the toilet, because I know that people will like me if I do that. If I'm an artist, people are going to think I'm the greatest artist in town that they know, right? Because then I don't have to deal with all the other stuff. People aren't going to wonder, oh, is he gay? He sure acts like it. He's a little flamboyant. He's got to be gay. Or is he just a budding artist, right? We're kind of extreme in their dramatization of things anyway, right? Is that a generalization? Did I just show you a generalization? All artists, right? Mm-mm. Exactly, that's a stereotype. What are some other things that might be something that the youth are going to experience? Come on in. Your health, right. Health may be a huge factor. If I go to the doctor, it's going to take me a long time to find a doctor that I'm comfortable with. And it did. Okay? For youth, we expect kids to go to the doctor and say, "No, tell them what's wrong with you." Because I don't feel good. But if you start asking me more questions, am I going to be honest about who I'm having sex with? Because I know that you're going to know that, I know you know my mom and dad, and I don't want to come out to them yet. I'm not ready. So I'm going to be guarded. But you also, in that respect, thank you for bringing that up, a little segue here. Make sure when you're working with youth that they have a healthcare provider who's going to be open and receptive to having a patient who's gay. Because if they don't, are they going to get adequate medical care? No. Right? And I always test, right? That when I first moved to Sioux Falls and I went to a chiropractor, and if she could have ran out of the room, she would have, right? But, us ladies get to go to our physician for our wonderful, fun annual things that we get to do as women, right? And I thought, you know what, I'm just going to go to this male physician. I didn't know. I just kind of randomly picked a name, and I walked in, and he knew statistics. He knew information. He knew the differences for lesbian health and gay male health. And I thought he would have been the last person on the face of the earth from when I first met him. But you have to have those conversations. So ask, when you're trying to help set up services for your youth, ask about the providers. What do you know? Tell me. And if you want resources, just go to your favorite internet site, type in LGBT health, and it'll pop up a whole bunch of information there. If you want LGBT mental health services, pop that in. There's resources all over the place. But people have to start talking about it, okay? You have to find out what it is. Because if not, we're going to end up with youth who do what 5 young men did in the last week, right? 5 souls were lost to suicide. Just some statistics. 48 to 76% of sexual minority youth admit in a recent national study, 48 to 76% admitted that they'd thought about attempting suicide. Okay? Sadly, 29 to 42% have attempted suicide. Okay? 29 to 42% have attempted. Okay? Then we also have to bring in the kids who, because of their behaviors, because of acting out, because of questioning authority, it's like, you don't know anything about me. I remember in high school I had a teacher tell me I had a chip on my shoulder, and I thought, yep, and so do you, right? But I was that kid. I didn't really know, but that wasn't the only issue I was dealing with. I had issues growing up in my household that nobody knew about. Nobody talked about. It was just, nope. I got to get out of here so I can run home, check to see how drunk my dad is, and do these things, and then go back to school. Was I going to concentrate at school? Too many things going on. So you want to get to know the kids. What is happening in their lives? Okay? When I started in social work, the one thing that I remember is hearing other workers say, we don't have any gay kids in our system. And I'm thinking, oh, and you know what? When I moved to South Dakota, and that was about 17 years ago, that was the first thing that I heard then. 15 years ago. That's not that long ago. We don't have any gay kids in our system. I don't think I know anybody gay. And I'm thinking, oh boy, do we have some work to do. But if you don't have conversations, people don't know. People don't know that maybe the person they're sitting beside identifies as LGBT. People don't know that their coworker identifies as LGBT. They may not. The individual may not be at that point yet. And we're going to talk a little bit about terminology just so we all get on the same page. Want to flip for me there, please? So hopefully by the end of our training, you're going to be able to articulate some of the experiences that we've just run through for LGBT youth in care. We'll identify 3 ways that you can be a more effective ally for LGBT youth in out-of-home care. And then I'm going to tell you throughout the day, hopefully, throughout the next hour, where you can access online resources. We'll show you some of them that'll help you move forward with whomever it is that you're hitting that roadblock with of, I don't think so, right? Okay. Just keep rolling. Some more things that we'll run throughout our time. And this training actually started as a day-long pre-conference training at a national CASA conference. So I apologize. I roll through things really fast just because I want to give you as much information as I can. But these are some of the things that we're going to talk about. Okay? And they might just be randomly interjected through. If you have any questions or comments, please speak up. We can keep going. Got to show you buffalo, since, you know, that's what we have in South Dakota. We have buffalo. But that's a pretty good analogy for me of the aggressions, right, that kids might experience. How about homelessness? We've got runaway youth. The numbers there are astounding. You can keep going. And then we've got kids who are locked up in systems where they're more at risk. And then they wind up homeless on the streets, creating more struggles for themselves, leading to substance abuse, survival skills, right? And then they get locked up again, which isn't really a safe place to be. So we've got LGBTQ youth that are overrepresented in populations involved in state systems. Okay, so it could be foster care. Keep going. It could be juvenile justice. We've got high rates of violence and rejection after coming out. And that could be within their home, within their family, their biological family. It may not be mom or dad. It might be their brother or their uncle. Because some families just don't want to know. Some families don't want to talk about it. Others are like, I'm going to beat the gay right out of you. Okay? You don't know the history of the person's journey because they're all going to be different. And that coming out process may happen in real short order. They might be teenagers. They might be older youth. They might be adults before they come out. Okay? I recently met a gentleman who is 68 years old and just came out to his family. So you never know when it's going to happen. And for him, it was a conscious decision because I have those conversations with people. I want to know, why at 68? What happened? And he says, well, my wife passed away, my kids are all adults and moved on, and it's about time I can be myself. Okay? I respect that. Right? This number saddens me greatly. 25 to 40% of homeless youth identify as LGBTQ. Okay? That's not good because we know that many of those youth have run away from out-of-home care because they've decided that it's safer to live on the streets than it is to stay in their group home, than it is to stay in their foster home, than it is to stay in their own biological home. 25 to 40%. Right? When we look at an estimation of more than 4 to 10% of youth in state care identify as LGBT. What are the latest numbers? Like 560,000 kids in out-of-home care across the country? 56,000 kids identify. If we added up every program in the state, in your state alone or in the country, would we come up with that number? Would it match? Likely not. And I challenged this survey because I'm always wondering if youth is not out, are they going to answer? Would that number really be higher? Okay? So I kind of question where it comes from. You can go ahead. Thank you. All right. So when we look at kids who are victimized, isn't he sad? I just want to take him home and love him. All right? We're talking about 70% of youth in a study that was done in New York. 70% of the youth there said that they were harassed in the group homes that they lived in. Okay? And Jacqueline was kind enough to share with me your Louisiana report. If you all don't know where to access that, talk with Jacqueline. She'll show you where your numbers are represented in this study. The numbers are, I think, are at that or if not a little bit higher. Okay? 100% of the kids in this study that was done reported verbal harassment, not only by their peers, but by staff. The same holds true in your study. Okay? 78% of kids are displaced or run away from facilities because of hostility. In here, they have quotes, and they show the letters where the kids wrote the notes talking about the abuse that was instilled on them by staff and peers, and the staff did nothing. Okay? This was a very good read. I read it twice. I read it when she first sent it to me, and I read it again on the plane yesterday. This isn't only true in Louisiana. This is true around the country. Okay? Kids are experiencing that. Kids don't find permanency. Why? Because it's not safe for you to go home. Right? And I can't find a foster home to take a gay kid. So where am I going to put him? Right? We're going to find a group home. Now, how safe is that if we house a kid with other youth who are maybe hostile or staff who are hostile towards LGBTQ individuals? We have to do our homework. So if you find out from a worker or if you're the worker, ask those facilities, what training do you have for your staff on working with LGBT youth? Okay? If they don't have any, ask what is their policy? How are they going to intervene on a kid's behalf if this happens? And give some scenarios. Okay? What's going to happen? How are you going to deal with the staff? And how are you going to handle the kid? Because if a kid has to defend himself, and then all of a sudden he's no longer the victim because he's the perpetrator because he fought back, a lot of times, and even in your study here locally, kids get then sent to the juvenile justice system where it's worse. Okay? We don't want that to happen. So talk about that. And if that happens, speak up. jump up and down if that youth is out to you. The key thing, please take away from this, if the youth is not out and hasn't come out to you, don't guess. Don't assume because you read it in a file that it's true, because maybe the person who wrote that information made an assumption or presumption based on the youth's dress or manner of speakings or mannerisms, right? Don't make assumptions, okay? And we'll talk about how can you show the youth that you're going to be someone safe. I worked with some kids who were segregated. One trans youth that I worked with, they didn't know where to put him, okay? And that's what they told me. We don't know where to put him. Well, it was a transgender youth who was male to female, and we'll talk about those. They had her sleep on a cot in the stairway between the two floors.
Wow.
Okay? What did that tell her?
She doesn't belong.
You don't belong. Do you think that?
Either place.
What?
You don't belong either place.
Yeah, you don't belong anywhere. All right. Yeah, exactly. You don't belong either place. We don't know if you're a guy or a girl. So we're going to just put you in the middle, and you can sleep there and not have any privacy. All right? It happens all over the country, folks. It really does. And it might be as simple as keeping a young lesbian, separate from her peers. Because, oh my God, all she wants to do is jump in the sack with them. Right? So she can't go on any of the outings with the girls. So we're just going to keep her here in this house in this neat little box. Right? Or maybe it's a young gay male and he wants to go to the mall with the girls because that's what the girls do. And the guys go to football games and he's just not interested in football. Nope, can't do that because you're a guy. You're going to the game, like it or not. Okay? Let's find out what are the options. Want to move up one for me? Down one? Sorry. Yep, keep going. Okay. Where are you at? Are you backing up? There we go. Right? So we've got kids who are classified as sex offenders. One young man I worked with, he's funny. He's an adult now, and he's told me I can share his story. He was a kid that I met. He was in a sex offender treatment program, and I went up and I introduced myself to him. And in South Dakota, you have to drive hours to get anywhere. So I drove up to meet him and said, "Hey, Josh," introduced myself as his juvenile correction agent. And he goes, "Yeah, so what are you going to do for me?" And I'm like, "Well, depends. What are you going to do for you? Why are you here?" And he goes, "Well, I'm bisexual. I guess that means I'm a sex offender." And I said, "Tell me more. What was your experience? How did you end up here?" Well, he had sex with then his girlfriend, and his mom decided to work out this deal with the state that he would be charged out as a sex offender. So he had to go to a sex offender with his name on the registry now, because he had just turned 18 and she was just under 2 years younger. So he was now on the sex offender registry, and it took him till he was 26 to get off of it. Okay? We have to be careful because a lot of kids are subjected to being classified as sex offenders for something that, not in Josh's case, but maybe it's 2 lesbians. Maybe it's 2 young gay men, and they're charged out as sex offenders because it creeped somebody out. Okay? It's not about control. You have to help people learn that being a sex offender doesn't mean having what, if it were a heterosexual male, teen male and teen female, would they have been charged out? Likely not. So that's always the question that I ask. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I'm kind of confused on the criminalization of it. Part.
Okay.
In other words, someone is accusing them of being sex offenders as opposed to actually being sex offenders. Is what you're saying?
Yeah, because if you look at it as normal, the confusion is between, are they just presumed to be sex offenders or are they charged out? In many cases, they're charged out as sex offenders through the court process, through the juvenile justice process, for what, if they were heterosexual kids, would have been considered normal sexual exploration.
Okay, but you said Josh had sex with a girl.
He did at that point, and that was what brought him there. Okay, and he shouldn't have been charged. It was just his mom Yeah, it was just his.
Want him to have sex with a girl as opposed
You know, she was a little off her rocker. Yeah, you would think so. You know, but for her, for his mother, it was about, oh my gosh, I got to do something to help my kid. And she thought it was a great deal. She didn't have the funds to hire an attorney. Okay? Now, right. So once he got into that system, then he started talking about being bisexual. And then they're like, oh my gosh, we might have more charges. And we can't keep him with the guys. And now what do we do? And how do we treat him? So it opened up this big can of services that they were trying to instill on Josh. Okay? They wanted him to go to counseling. You know, we got to fix you. Right? You had sex with a girl, that means you're straight. You know, what do you mean you're bisexual? Right? And then it was like, oh my gosh, what do we do? How do we treat a bisexual kid? You don't treat a kid because they're bisexual. Right? That's just what brought him there. So sometimes you have to ask more questions. Okay? Because had I just read the paperwork, you know, I thought, well, all right, he was an unfortunate kid at 18 who had sex with his girlfriend who hadn't quite had her 16th birthday, or he wouldn't have been charged out criminally. So you have to understand your laws and where did this kid end up that he maybe would have been. Okay? Yes, ma'am.
Isn't it it's my understanding that even if you're heterosexual and you're 18 and you have sex with a minor, you are going to get charged with crime.
Right, and that may hold true in Louisiana, that if you're 18, you're going to be charged out if you have sex with a person 2 years younger. Okay? And that may hold true. But
The whole story.
Correct.
He would have been facing some penalties anyway.
he may have been. However, it could have been pled down to something lesser than what landed him on a national sex offender registry. Okay? So, but it's not, it's not about Josh and being charged with that. It was about that only opened the door for him. But it opened the door to more issues within the program, right? Because they didn't know how to treat him. Because all of a sudden he's not just another straight little sex offender. Oh my gosh, we have a bisexual kid. What does that mean? They were less than prepared to deal with him. And once he aged out and we had a different conversation, it was, so Josh, tell me why, what made you feel comfortable that day in saying it? Because he'd not said it before to me. He goes, I said it to anyone else I'd ever worked with, and they all looked at me, and then they never came back. So I knew I was going to be stuck here. Okay? It didn't happen that time. All right? So you never know what's going to happen. You may be that one that the kid will share just enough information with you. Okay? All right. Kids are pathologized. It's not so much anymore, but there was a time when kids were sent to reparative therapies, right? We're gonna fix you. We're gonna take the lesbian right out of you, right? We're gonna take that gender identity issue right out of you. We're gonna fix you. Okay? It's not true. A lot of kids are told they're gonna go to hell, right? A lot of LGBTQ kids of color have to make a decision about, do I come out to my family and lose them and lose my church, which are very, very important, right? Not just to kids of color, but especially with African American kids. The statistics show that many kids will stay in the closet, or they're not going to say I'm gay, because they don't want to lose all of that they have around them, that buffer of family, their church, their friends. Because in a lot of faith-based communities, kids are ostracized. It's like, nope, you're out of here then. Okay? So pay attention when kids start talking about, I can't go back there. Well, find out why. Okay? Kids aren't respected. When you look at this young lady here, many times kids are not allowed to dress or groom as they prefer. Their gender identity isn't respected. Now, we don't know what her gender identity or sexual orientation is. But does she look isolated? She's looking around, right? We really don't know where kids are at. Maybe they haven't figured it out for themselves. Okay? So we have to allow them an opportunity to have information available to them. And maybe it's magazines, maybe it's books. Okay? I didn't ever in my lifetime, till I was an adult, well into my adult years, did I ever know that you could go to Barnes & Noble and there's a whole section of books for people like me. Right? Kids don't know where to access that. They're not going to find them in their school library or in the public library even sometimes. Okay? Help them find those resources. Right now, in the age of internet, kids are accessing things online. There's a little hesitation that I have with that because you don't always know where it's coming from, right? So help them find their local resources. Want to move on, please? Now I've rattled off a whole bunch of terminology, and I just want to talk a little bit about terminology. We've got a general base of terms that I've used a little bit here today. I want to make sure we're on the same page. But I have to recognize that I'm not in South Dakota, so my terminology there may be different than the youth you're dealing with here. Okay? It's kind of a fluid thing. It depends on which part of the country you're in. Right? So they're always going to be changing. It's going to be self-definition. Follow the kid's lead. Use the terminology that they're using. Okay? There's going to be, how many of you remember middle school? Did you have cliques down here in Louisiana? Well, that's a lot what it's like. Only this time it's with terminology. There's inwards and there's outwards. Okay? There's the kids who identify and fit in, and they're still outcasts. The greatest majority of kids who aren't accepted and that are the highest rate for continued abuse and harassment are transgender youth. So let's just talk about lesbian, and you can go through the top three there. Lesbian, gay, bisexual. Let's stop there. Okay? If you look at those definitions, we're talking about a lesbian being a woman who is emotionally, romantically, and sexually attracted to primarily other women. Okay? Bisexual is a person who's emotionally, romantically, and sexually attracted to both men and women. Okay? So it's not about the person being male or female with a bisexual individual. It's about the individual. Okay? Who they are and how do I feel when I'm with you emotionally, romantically, and sexually. We talk about a gay individual. In some context, as I've said earlier, it's a general, broad-based term. Okay? Primarily, it's a person whose emotional, romantic, and sexual attractions are for individuals of the same sex. For some reason, the gay guys accepted that term as their own, and I was corrected by one of them in my community who said, "You can't be gay, Lorraine. That's for men." And I'm like, "Okay, what am I?" "Because you're a lesbian." So we had to do a little education, and he's actually one of the individuals that I've grown to know from my part-time job. I thought, okay, we have a long way to go. But you never know. It's where he was at, and he was a transplant to South Dakota from the East Coast. So for him, very different. Okay? So you have to learn where they're at and where do they come from. Okay? We'll move on. Transgender, that's a big umbrella term as well. Okay? It's a term that can be used to describe people whose gender expression is non-conforming and whose gender identity is different from their assigned sex at birth. Okay? So in a nutshell, it means internally I feel different than what you see and what I see when I look in the mirror. Okay? Now even in that spectrum of people, there's a little hierarchy, a little ladder of who's better than whom. So when you look at transsexuals, they're in the process. We have gender queer. Okay? Gender queer is a new one for me. I learned that a couple years ago. We've got kids now who don't want to fit in any of the boxes that we create. Not male, not female, not LGBT or Q, so I'm gender queer. Okay? Or I might just be queer.
So what does it mean?
Gender queer?
Yeah.
Essentially, it's I'm not fitting in any of the boxes. It's a these are very binary terms, okay? If you are any of these, then you're this. So for a genderqueer, they're saying, I'm not going to identify as male or female. I'm not going to identify, Lorraine. I'm not going to tell you I'm lesbian. I am me, okay? So I'm not going to fit, any of those criteria. When you look at cross-dressers, cross-dressers don't have to be gay men. Most of them are heterosexual males. And then we have others whose gender expression varies from general norms. So really it's the umbrella of folks who don't identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual. Okay? If they're transgender, there's a whole different process that they're going to go through to find where they're going to fall. Okay? I may be a straight male, but I'm a cross-dresser. On the last Saturday of the month when I go to the transgender social group. Okay? Or I may be someone whose goal is sexual reassignment surgery. And I'm going to go from male to female through surgery. So I'll finally be that person that I see when I look in the mirror. Okay? The internal person, not the person that's looking back at me. Okay? So when we talk about sexual orientation, what's the difference? Kind of started. What's the difference between queer and questioning? Okay? Go. Queer. How many of you saw the movie Milk? Did any of you? One? If you haven't, please rent it, watch it. It's a great historical depiction of where the LGBT community came from. And it starts back in the 70s. What's it called? Milk. Milk. It's about Harvey Milk. Sean Penn played Harvey Milk. Right? We talk about it if you guys use the one of the activities in the National CASA training manual for volunteers. It's one of the exercises they talk about. If you haven't seen it, please watch it. It'll give you a great depiction of why it's a historically negative term for the LGBT community. Okay? But it's recently been reclaimed. Kids now are saying, you know what, I'm queer. And you'll hear them in the movie using that term. Okay? Questioning. That's kind of that active process that a lot of individuals go through. Where do I fit before I come out? I have to deal with a lot of things. Okay? How do we get there? Okay? So it's mostly used by young people who are in the process of determining their sexual orientation and or their gender identity. Does everyone have a sexual orientation? Does everyone have a sexual orientation? Yes? Okay. Jeez, I thought y'all left me for a minute. Gone out. Gone out the back door. All right. We'll get you there. We'll get you there. Okay, so, yes, we all have a sexual orientation. Okay? I didn't wake up and choose to be a lesbian any more than some of you woke up and chose to be heterosexual. Okay? It's not something that we do. We all have a sexual orientation. Okay? So the answer to that question is yes. You guys are so smart in Louisiana. Okay, you can move on. So here we go. We're going to talk about gender identity versus sexual orientation. Okay? Gender identity is that internal, deeply felt sense of being male or female, or something in between. Everybody has a gender identity. Okay? National studies show that by the age of 3, kids know if they are boys or girls. They know that difference. Okay? Sexual orientation, on the other hand, remember back to lesbian, gay, bisexual? Here we go again. It's that emotional, romantic, and sexual attraction. Whether it's for members of the same sex or different sex. Okay? It's more appropriate than sexual preference. I've been at my job for almost 10 years and I'm still working with my boss who uses, and I'm missing the quotation mark, sorry. Okay? It's not a preference. If I had my choice, I'd be straight because it'd be a whole lot easier. Okay? Most days. Okay?
You have a certain age
But-
that you can determine what's your sexual orientation.
You know, there is a study, and actually they quoted something in yours, but you know, I don't know that there's a particular age because it's about that process. And that process might be, like for the gentleman that I mentioned earlier who's 68, it took him 60 years, okay, to really internally figure out who he is, who he was, right? And he may have been that throughout his life. He just got to that point where he was willing to come out, okay? So if you can avoid a term, please don't talk with LGBT individuals about their sexual preference, because that's like saying, do you prefer ketchup or mustard? It's a choice, right? Okay. Do you prefer men or women, Lorraine? It's not a choice for me, okay? It's back to that emotional connection, okay?
I think a lot of times when you look at kids who are young, like I'm thinking about one particular child who's 4 years old, I think we kind of look at their mannerism and, you know, their demeanor and say this child has sexual, you know, feminine ways.
Okay, so we do. I think we stereotype, right? What you're saying is we look at individuals, little kids, right, based on their mannerisms, and we're gonna make that presumption of, oh, look at, he's gonna be a little gay boy. Look at him, right? His choice is he'd rather play with the girls and the Barbies than to go play with the trucks. Okay? That doesn't necessarily mean he's gay. Right? So it could be something that the kids experience. Maybe he's a little more open to his surroundings. So that's the hard part. And I think a lot of people do that. Even a lot of young dads. I can remember my nephew saying, no way, you're not buying my kid a doll. We don't have to buy him a doll. He's going to migrate to whatever he wants. Whatever's fun to play with that day. He's 4. He's 3. Right? It doesn't matter. Okay? Remember, by 3rd grade, they'll know if they're, for sure, you know, or by 3rd grade, sorry, by the age of 3, am I a boy or a girl? And then we see what happens. But it's this long, crazy journey of, oh my gosh, I gotta, you know, I'm in high school now and I have to act straight because I don't want to lose my friends. So I have to go to the prom with a guy whether I want to or not. Right? God help me, but I have to wear a dress. Right? Okay. You never know where that individual's process is going to be as far as coming out, because it's going to change. All right? You never know unless they share it with you, where they've been, where they've come from. And it's not just about sexual orientation, is it? It's about race and ethnicity. It's about the abuse or the neglect that they've experienced at home. And then it's about the system that we put them in that we believe is safer than what they're coming out of. Not always holds true, does it? So what can you do? I want you to be an ally, all right? I need you to recognize that working with LGBTQ youth is going to be a challenge, right? Because there isn't. I can't give you a black and white answer. I can't tell you that if you see this, then it equals that. I can't tell you that, okay? It may challenge our own personal values or feelings and beliefs, okay? Just as it does being a white woman trying to learn about other cultures, right? I grew up with a very biased father who if I would have believed an inkling of what he had to say as far as his beliefs and notions, I'd be by far a very different person than I am today. And I have to thank my mother for that and my siblings for that, okay? But there are some other things that you can do, and we can go to the next slide. What time is it?
25 to.
Awesome. Plenty of time. All right. How many of you know the difference between acceptance and affirmation? Right? Acceptance would be saying to an LGBT individual, well, it's okay. you know, I accept you for who you are, but just don't tell me what you do, right? It's not about what I do, it's about who I am, okay? Because I don't want to know what you do either, right? That's your business. It shouldn't be mine. But that's what happens a lot to the LGBT community is people go, oop, you're gay. Oop. So then we have to talk about, let's not talk about what goes on in your bedroom, okay? So accept me for the individual that I am, but affirm who I am, okay? Because if you just accept, then you're not all the way there yet, and that tells me you have more growth to do. So hopefully we'll get you from acceptance to affirmation. We'll talk about support. How can you support LGBT youth? We'll talk about understanding. All right. We've talked about the terminology. Use correct name and forms of address, pronouns, especially if it's a transgender youth. Okay? If it's a transgender male to female and she wants to be called she, then do. And ask the facility or ask the family that that youth is with, is that okay with you? Do you understand why that's important? Because that's who that youth is. Okay? They'll get there. I promise you, if people have resources and if people have information and if people have some of their questions answered or at least affirmed to say, I'm still confused, which I can see it in your face, we're still confused between some things, it's about getting you there. It's a process. Just like it was a process for LGBT youth to come out, it's a process to get to that point. So we want to, yes ma'am.
Courageous one to put it out there, but it's the acceptance and affirmation. I don't think that the confusion comes from reading definitions. A lot of the times the battle comes from your own personal beliefs and spiritual beliefs.
I agree.
Compared to acceptance and affirmation, Janice is an advocate with a team who some days she says, I like girls. Some says I like boys. Some days she's not sure at all. So she goes through all the levels.
Sure.
LGBTQ all the way through. But what we've learned to do for her is our own spiritual beliefs. We tell her all the time, we accept where you are and who you are. All we want you to know is we love you.
That's great.
And we stick there, but the more we tell her that, the more she opens to Janice as her advocate with everything. And our own spiritual beliefs is when we have to learn to subject and, to surrender and say, that's not important right now. It's advocating for her.
Correct. So
I think that's where the battle comes.
Thank you. Those are excellent points because it is. It is very much there, and it's very much here, and it's very much there, and it is. It is truly about where are we personally with our own biases, with our own information, and how do we keep our professional responsibilities separate from our personal beliefs. That's what it comes down to. Thank you for bringing that up. Because that, especially in the Bible Belt, it's a big struggle. But that's what I tell our volunteers too, is you have to be able to say, I feel strongly this way, but I'm going to stay neutral and support you as a person, okay? In doing that, you don't have to accept because we get hung up on the behavior, okay? And kids are all over the bar, so are adults, right? Until you can finally get to that spot where you're comfortable in your own skin, you have to allow that kid to be lesbian today, questioning tomorrow. Thursday they might be back to being gay or lesbian or who knows where. Or I might be bisexual by Friday because I don't know. We'll see what happens for the weekend, right? Okay? You don't know. You don't know where they're at. So allowing her to deal with that process is about all you can do. And so kudos to you folks. Congratulations. That's awesome. That's really looking outside the box that I believe should be demolished. We have to look at the individual. We shouldn't categorize people. Okay? So maybe it's allowing her to groom according to whom she is today. Okay? If it's a transgender youth, maybe it's letting him have his hair long and putting it up in a bun with a pencil in the back because she wants to today. Or for a young lady to not wear a dress to church, or whatever it may be that's the issue. And as I mentioned earlier, the practice in gender segregated activities. Okay? Let a gay youth go to the mall with the girls if that's what he chooses to do, because that's what's best for him today. Okay? So we're going to talk about support, be non-judgmental, right? Which was a great example already given, right? Not going to judge that young lady because she doesn't know where she fits today. And we'll allow her to explore that, okay? We're not going to make assumptions because we see a 3-year-old little guy playing with the Barbie dolls at the daycare. Oh boy, here we go. Here comes another one, right? No, he's just playing because that's what they play with today, right? You never know. But when you're talking to a youth, regardless of their age, listen, most importantly. And that's just across the board. That's just not with LGBT youth. Just listen to them and hear what they say. And don't be afraid to ask questions. That's one of the best tools you can have. If they start a conversation with you, say, you know what, I don't know a lot about being transgender. What does that mean to you? Don't make the assumption that because I've given you terms that you'll all memorize and Jacqueline will send you a test. No. It's about knowing what that definition means to that particular individual. Because it'll change. Maybe between Monday and Friday it'll change, right? Use gender-neutral language, okay? Don't ask a kid when you first meet him if he has a girlfriend. Don't ask a young lady if she has a boyfriend. Okay? Why would that be important? What's going to happen? I'm sorry?
They won't be open to discussing with you.
Yeah, they're not going to be open with you. Right?
We're ready to put them in the box.
We got the choir over here. Right. We're going to put them in a box. We made an assumption. Okay? If you were to ask me in an interview, what do you and your husband do? What would I tell you? Nothing. Right? If I'm a teenage girl and you ask me if I have a boyfriend, what am I going to say? No. What did you just learn about me? Absolutely nothing. Right? So if you ask me, is there anyone important in my life? I would say yes. I have a partner at home who's really mad that I forgot my ring and my watch. Right? But if you ask a youth, who is important in your life? You might hear, if it's a young gay man, you might hear about John. You might hear about Sarah if it's a lesbian. Okay? But if you don't ask that question in general terms, you're never going to get to know that kid. Okay? Or that adult. Okay? So don't just use it when you're being a CASA or a social worker or a CASA staff member. Use it all the time. Introduce your spouse as your significant other. Get familiar with it. Use it every day. Okay? Not just when you're doing your job. Because I guarantee you, people are listening and kids are watching and learning from you. Okay? It's not about ownership of a term. It's about making kids safe. And if we help them use that language, do you think we'd have a better, safer place for all of our kids when they go off to college and again start in that triangle of isolation and did I feel safer at home? We're starting all over because they're experiencing a new first. It's that new experience of going off to college. And all of a sudden, I don't know anybody again that I can trust. So I'm isolated. So educate yourselves and others. Develop comfort in using the LGBTQ terms. Know how to say lesbian, know how to say transgender, know how to say bisexual, and let them be used easily. Okay? Have resources at work or at home. Hang something up in your office. Just go find a postcard. Okay? We've got that. I like this one. Go buy some ribbon and just staple one of these around. Because I guarantee you, LGBT individuals, when they walk into a store, they're going to see things like this. Or when they walk into your office, or when they walk into maybe a meeting with everybody. If this was up on a wall, they might be more apt to share, ooh, that one's a little interesting. Just go buy a roll of it. Make a ribbon and staple it together. Have a day in your office that everybody's going to wear one. Or have a conference and have everybody, or a workshop, have everybody wear a ribbon. Let that be part of it. Okay? There are things that you can access online. We'll keep going. Educate yourself. We've talked about that one. Develop comfort in using the terms. Have the resources. Respond to harassment and violence. How are you going to do it? What is your office protocol going to be? If you have a kid who's come out to you and is comfortable with you and feels safe with you and says, you know what, Danny, my peers are beating me up because they're calling me gay and they're calling me all sorts of names and I don't feel safe here. How are you going to respond? Okay, what's your policy? Do you want your volunteers to tell your staff? And then how are you going to handle it as a program? What are you going to do? Because if you don't have that decided up front, you're going to be reactionary. I want you to be proactive. Have those in place. You can go online and I'll show you where to get things. Be understanding. Prime example, and you gals are great. I appreciate you sharing, because every youth has the same right as any other kid in care under the 14th Amendment to be somewhere safe and to have their needs met, whether that's medical needs, counseling needs. And they shouldn't be in counseling only because they're gay. They should be in counseling because of the abuse and the things that brought them out of their home, if they need that. Be fair and avoid double standards. If on Friday night the other kids in the group home get to go out on a date with their significant other, then a lesbian teenage girl should be able to go out on a date with her significant other. If that's not happening, challenge the system, but have that worked out in your program. How are you going to handle that? What if you have I forget what state it was down here, but what if it's a lesbian young lady who wants to take her significant other to prom? How are you as Mississippi? Thank you. I knew it wasn't here, but I can remember where. How are you going to handle that? How are you going to advocate for her so that they avoid double standards? Encourage dialogue. Sit people down and start talking. I'm so excited to hear what's happening here in Louisiana with Jacqueline's lead. There's some really exciting things happening. Keep an open mind. Keep an open mind. Right? Be open to new information. If you don't know the answers, it's okay. You don't have to know it all. But just keep educating yourself. Learn more. Read more. Use common sense. If something doesn't feel right, trust your gut, because the odds are you're right and you just have to hang in there. And maybe it's ordering this. Getting down to basics. This will help you. There's 14 little packets inside. One-sheet tools. You can copy them off for wherever you're heading. It'll give you ideas. You can access this online. This was a joint effort between Lambda Legal and the Child Welfare League of America. You can access these. They'll send them to you free if they have them, or you can access it online. Okay? It's on your list of resources that was in your handouts. Out of the margins, this book is an easy read. I read it on a flight from Sioux Falls to Seattle. This book came about, it kind of came in reverse order. Before this book came out by Child Welfare League of America and Lambda Legal, there was a study done on 14 states that showed what protections were in place for LGBT individuals and what was missing, and it was glaringly obvious we had big problems in our country. Okay? From that, they held listening forums around the country where kids could come in and talk about their experiences. Parents could come in, social workers could come in, CASAs could come in, anybody that wanted to. John Q. Public could come in. And we had great discussions. From that came this book. Okay? Then came from this book came these tools because everybody said, tell me more. How do I handle these situations? There's one in here on dealing with the faith-based community. You can access these. Have things hanging up in your office. Something as simple as this. Look for these signs when you're looking for a physician. Okay, they come in different languages. This DVD you can get from the National Center for Lesbian Rights out of California. This DVD is all youth talking about their experiences in and out of the system with and without CASAs. Okay? Excellent tool for in-services. It's free. Okay? Online then, if you order this, it'll give you terminology. It's going to give you questions to ask. It's all laid out for you to do your in-services. It's really slick. If you go on to the National CASA website now, this was from the fall of 2009. We did an entire connection, the entire magazine you can download in here, and it's one of the handouts in my entire life. I couldn't ever be as eloquent as the young man who wrote the article himself about his experience of being a young gay male in the system. Please download this. It's worth your time. It's the fall 2009 episode magazine. You have the terminology. This was the 12 tips article that I wrote. That's from that 2009 connection. That's in your handouts. Resources. This is just a start. If there's something that you can't find, and this was in your handouts too, if there's some resource that you can't find, please email me, call me. If you go to, it's not CASA.net anymore. What are we? CASA for Children. It's on there. There's a podcast talking about working with LGBT youth. There is an annotated bibliography. This was the first thing that we did with the LGBTQ work group with National CASA. This can be downloaded as well. These are all resources from around the country. You shouldn't be left. If you printed all this out, you'd probably kill every tree in Louisiana. That is on the National CASA website. If you go to, there's a PFLAG, which is on one of the resources too. That will connect you with this information. There's a place called safeschools.org that has information. There are books. I think that was one of the handouts. There's a brand new book that just came out on working with transgender youth and their gender identity issues for professionals and parents. It's an excellent book. I was going to bring it along, but it didn't come in time. So, any questions? I don't even know where we're at time-wise. Are we okay time-wise? Okay. Any questions? That's a lot of information. As you look through the materials, if there's something specific that you're interested in or that I didn't cover, I try to do just a really broad base. It's a really short period of time. Let me know. I'd be happy to process anything with you. We train again this afternoon, and then I think one time tomorrow. My contact information is coming up. And there's one thing, though, that I want to show you if you can bear with me. My favorite person in the whole world is Dr. Seuss. And I'll tell you why. He had this to say: be who you are and say what you feel, because those that mind don't matter, and those that matter don't mind. Right? Now, if everybody believed that, wouldn't kids be a whole lot less mean to one another? And then there's one other woman who is also a phenomenal lady. Her name is Coretta Scott King. And here's a quote from her. I still hear people say that I should not be talking about the rights of lesbian and gay people. But I hasten to remind them that Martin Luther King Jr. said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Right? Isn't that really what we should all remember? And there's one more thing that I just want to... Two things. And I've got stuff around the room if you want to look at it, you sure can. Group homes make terrible parents. One thing that I want you to do is challenge your systems, wherever they are, to not have that final place be for an LGBTQ youth long-term foster care. They shouldn't grow up in group homes. Sometimes we need to redefine family. Okay? Some states, my own included, get stuck on you can't go home. You can't go to your family. It's not safe there. Explore with the youth who is important in their lives. Who might be another option. Okay? Let's redefine family and give everybody that family to go home to. So thank you for having me. Thank you for your time and attention.